Right, so now we want to be playing with the Homestead stuff. Before we do that, I just want to do something here. Properties on Oracle VirtualBox and compatibility. I want to run this in Windows 8 compatibility mode and run it as admin. It's just to be safe. And I want to do the same thing with the Vagrant exe. So let's go into HashiCorp Vagrant into its bin directory and set its properties. Okay, that's just a precautionary thing before we get to actually doing what we want to do. Right, so now let's open Bash as an admin. All right, and we are in our home directory already. Now if we issue a Linux command, list the directory and list in long format with all items shown, we can see we're in that home directory there. And from here, what we want to now do is clear, or I could just go Control L. We can check that Vagrant is installed by asking it to version itself. Let it quickly build and then it'll return with a value. Okay, so it's built itself and we can see we're running 174 and it's accessible from here, which means it's correctly installed. We can access it from anywhere in any path. Okay, so what do we want to do? We want to add the VirtualBox Homestead VirtualBox. We want to add the Homestead VM image to Vagrant for it to manage on our behalf via the Oracle VirtualBox. So we tell it Vagrant, we want to be working with a box and we want to add, and the box that we want to add is Laravel's Homestead. But now, if I hit enter right here, what this is going to do is it's going to jump out on the web and it's going to try and pull that VM image. Now, that's a big file. So there's a tip here. If you've pre-downloaded it, just copy the image into your home directory where we're going to be running this from. Okay, and add the box name virtualbox.box as the final parameter. This way we don't have to let it jump out on the web and have to pull that file as a 900 meg file. We can do it locally. It's just a much quicker way of doing it. Okay, so it's added the box, but that's all it's done. It's just the box. We still need the configuration files that are associated with the Homestead environment. And for that we can use the git clone functionality. So we say git clone, and the repo we want to clone is sitting at github.com/Laravel/homestead, and we want to push that into the Homestead directory. Okay, and it's done. And if we look at what it's done over here, you'll see it's created a Homestead directory there. Actually, let's look at it in Explorer. It's probably easier. Okay, so we can see that it's created the Homestead directory after we've cloned the repo. Let's go back up one, but it hasn't done anything else. We now need to do the following command. We go into that directory where we've created the Homestead repo, and you can see there's an initialization file there, so we run bash init.sh. That sets up our environment. And now if we go back in here you'll see it's created a Homestead directory with some files in it. We'll come back to this just now. And it's created that Vagrant directory from before, where it's now managing the Vagrant environment. And that's it. It's all initialized. Okay, so now let's dig around the file system in a bit more detail to really get a handle on what it's doing. First of all, let's look in the Homestead directory. You'll see there is a file there called the Vagrant file. Now the way Vagrant works is when we issue the Vagrant up command, which is the command to bring up a Vagrant managed environment, it will look for a Vagrant file in the present working directory and then execute accordingly. So let's take a look at that file. Alrighty, so we can see it's setting configuration path. It's going to be looking for a Homestead YAML file, JSON file, scripts file. It's going to set some aliases. It's going to be running that file there, and it's going to run the provisioning. So that's basically what the Vagrant file does. Okay, we can close that one. Now let's go and have a look in the actual Homestead directory. There's a scripts file that it's going to be running. This scripts file is blank, it's a placeholder. It's going to set the aliases in that file, and then there's this file, the Homestead YAML file. This is quite an important file. It's the configuration file. Here we set the IP, memory, CPUs, the provider that we're going to be using. These two are critical. That's where it's going to be picking up our public-private key pairs from, and then the folder mappings. Now, I'm actually going to change this. I'm going to change it to C:\code because, and it's a personal preference, I don't like my projects in terms of the source code hanging off my home directory in Windows. I prefer them to be sitting directly off the root of a code directory. So I change that there. It's going to map to that virtual directory on the VM. Also going to change the site name because we're going to be doing something else. Let's change that, and that's going to be mapping to L5110. Okay. I'm not going to explain this in detail. Basically, all this is doing is it's setting up where it's going to be mapping on the drive. It's going to be easier for me to show you actually the impact of this a little bit later on. Okay, so that's the Homestead YAML file. Let's save that. Let's close that. And let's go into the Homestead directory and into the scripts directory, and let's have a look at this file. This is the core configuration file. This is where it's telling the VirtualBox manager exactly how it wants to be set up, and you can see it's pretty well documented. Setting up a few settings, port naming, port forwarding, etc., etc. Okay. So that's pretty much everything from a configuration perspective. So we've got the VirtualBox installed, or the Homestead container installed. Now we can look at getting it running, and this is generally where things tend to start to unravel.